That was an amazing intro. Thank you. And it's a delight to be here, so thank you very much for having me. As Sarah said, I work at Virgin Management, which is the sort of central part of the Virgin Group. I joined Virgin about 10 years ago. I actually originally joined Virgin Mobile, which was part of Virgin Media. And I was one of their HR business partners. And then 6 years ago, I moved into Virgin Management in a kind of a version of the job that I do now. I have a very long job title, and actually I almost was going to start by making trying to make some funny gag about my name and obviously the theme with bridges, but I failed miserably, but at least I kind of flagged it. So when I moved, as Sarah said, my role is to work with all of the Virgin Group companies globally, and just very quickly, sorry if it's a bit dull, but the Virgin Group is a very complex structure. We are not one trading organisation. We are made up of, as Sarah said, many different organisations that are individually operating, they're independently operating, and that makes my remit a very interesting one, to say the least. And so when I moved into the group into the group role about 6 years ago, I came in with a specific mandate, which was to change the nature of the relationship between the group and between the operating companies. Before I arrived, historically, there had been a bit of a disconnection between the Virgin companies and the way that we did things at Virgin Group. There was a sense that Group was sitting in a little bit of an ivory tower, and of course we are still that little bit further removed from some of the customer challenges, some of the operating challenges that the businesses experience. But my mandate was to build, in some cases, and rebuild some bridges and some connections across the group, but also to encourage the businesses to build those bridges and connections to each other. There's a huge amount of power and value in being part of this global family, and we probably weren't leveraging that enough. And the way that I went about that was certainly not rocket science, but one of the things that it really reinforced for me is the importance of face-to-face time, which is kind of challenging if you've got obviously businesses all over the world, but I don't think many things can replace the opportunity to sit, side by side with someone or across the table from someone and see the whites of their eyes and really truly listen to get a deeper understanding about what's going on for that person, what's going on for that business, what are their challenges, what are their requirements, and where are the opportunities for us to work more effectively together. And once you've got that relationship established, you obviously need to keep, pay attention to it. You need to maintain it, and but it makes it a lot easier if that connection, that bridge, if you like, is there to enable that two-way flow of communication. And it took a lot of time and effort, but I'm very pleased to say now that we have a fantastic kind of global community of certainly of my key stakeholders, which the teams that lead kind of the people experience in all of the businesses. And that's because we have that sense that we have a shared goal and that we're supporting each other. And that shared goal is specifically around creating a great employee experience for our 72,000 employees globally. And central to that is how do we create a sense of meaning and belonging for our people? So we know that it's hugely important to our Virgin employees. They join the Virgin family. We often use that word. There's some interesting connotations sometimes associated with that. But when our employees consider joining us and after their time with us, they have the expectation that they're joining a group of companies. They have an expectation that they're joining a much bigger entity than the specific Virgin company that they arrive at. And so, part of what my team and the people teams try to do is to make sure that we are creating a global community of brand advocates, there's nothing wrong in admitting that, but helping them to make the connections with each other and helping them to really feel part of something bigger. And we do that through many different things. I think I've talked before about the fact that we do have a really uniting set of values. There's a lot of debate about the value of values, but they do truly unite us. We talk about our red thread that runs through the Virgin kind of global community. And again, we have a number of mechanisms in place that we try to create that sense of belonging for our people. One of the things that we did about 2 years ago, which, given that we've been going for 48 years, you would have thought that Virgin would have had it before. We had never articulated what our employer brand was. We'd never articulated what employees can expect when they come to work for us and what we expect of them in return. We all had a gut instinct for what it was, but we also have an allergy to codifying anything too clearly. But we finally got around to doing this, and it centres around our purpose, our business purpose, which is changing business for good, which essentially means that we make sure that we put people and planet alongside profit. But this purpose is then underpinned by 4 pillars. And 2 of the pillars, I think, are particularly relevant to the theme of bridges, and that is be yourself and go together. And now these pillars have to work as pairs. They have to be in balance. They have to be in harmony with one another. And the go together, for me, really encapsulates that sense that we are stronger together. And as I said, there is a real power and value when we are aligned and that we're pulling behind a shared goal, when we have those connections across the group so that we can share learnings, we can support each other. And some of you may recognise the sort of phrasing around go together, but it's actually from an African proverb which we loved, and we kind of wanted to emulate that as much as we can. And this African proverb is, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And so this is kind of at the core of our people promise and how we also think about diversity and inclusion. It frames the need for people to be able to be the individuals that they are and not to put on a corporate veneer when they walk in the door, but to recognise and respect the fact that we need to do that in an inclusive environment where everybody is welcome. I'm really conscious, and this is going on to a point that Sarah just made, I'm really conscious that our employees aren't unique in wanting that sense of meaning and wanting that sense of belonging. I studied anthropology at university many years ago, and that sense of belonging and kinship is kind of a fundamental part of the human condition, and it's been there for millennia. And I guess it kind of originally derived from the fact that we needed to be part of a tribe or part of a community in order to survive, quite frankly, in terms of being able to defend ourselves against wild animals and or other tribes, and also to survive in terms of feeding ourselves. And obviously society has moved on some significant way since our sort of hunter-gatherer ancestors, but you still see those kind of tribal affiliations now in society, in many different components of society. So that sense of belonging and kinship, if you like, is a fundamental part of the human DNA. And that makes me think, given I spend a lot of time trying to think about what's the future of work, what do we need to be thinking about as an employer to make sure that we're creating the best kind of environment as we can for our people. And there's a lot of talk about the fact that the gig economy, people are going to be working in portfolio careers, they're no longer going to work for one employer, and indeed there may not be workplaces in the future. I think the example, if you look at like the space, WeWork space, that would suggest that it's not going to go down that extreme length, because people do want that sense of connection and sense of community. Even if they're not actually working on the same things, people want to feel that they're in that kind of hubbub and they have those day-to-day connections. And so, for me, whilst I think having greater flexibility and greater choice is hugely, hugely important, I kind of take some reassurance in the fact that we will never move. I don't believe we'll ever move away from the fact that, people do want those connections in many different components of their life. And with societies changing as it is, work more often than not is the place through which people get that sense of meaning and connection. And that's certainly something that we hold very dear at Virgin. And as I said, one of the kind of core parts of my job to work with all the other Virgin companies is to make sure that we are creating a place where people can find those connections and that sense of belonging, sense of meaning that they're looking for. Thank you.